All right, let's dive into one of those amendments you probably don't hear about too often, but wow, is it important. We're talking about the Seventh Amendment. It might sound a little obscure, I guess, but it's actually a rule built for the kinds of everyday conflicts we all run into.
But before we jump into old-school legal language, let's bring this into the real world. Let's start with a modern-day problem, something you could totally see happening to you, or maybe a friend.
Okay, so picture this. You hire a contractor to fix your roof. They get the job done, but when you see the final bill, it's way, way higher than what you talked about. They're telling you the job was more complicated than they thought. You're saying, no way. So now what? You're stuck. It's their word against yours. How do you actually solve something like that?
Well, that kind of disagreement, where one person says, hey, you owe me something, that's the core of what we call a civil case. We're not talking about crimes here. This is all about disputes over things like money, property, or broken agreements.
Now, here's the really cool part. The people who wrote the Constitution, they actually had a plan for situations exactly like that contractor dispute. They didn't just invent it out of thin air. They looked at centuries of legal history and created a rulebook for it.
And here it is, the Seventh Amendment in all its original glory. Go ahead and take a look. Yeah, I know, that 18th century language is a bit of a mouthful, right? But believe it or not, packed inside that one single sentence are two really powerful protections for you. So let's break this thing down.
Okay, that first part. In suits at common law, what does that even mean? Well, it points to a specific legal tradition that came over from England. See, it's different from laws passed by politicians. Common law was basically built up over hundreds of years from the decisions judges made in real-life cases. So the founders were pretty much saying, look, for all these classic types of arguments, contract disputes, property issues, personal injuries, we're sticking with the jury system.
So when you really pull that long sentence apart, you realize it's doing two separate, super important things. It's kind of like a two-for-one deal when it comes to your rights.
All right, let's look at this. On one side, you've got the part everyone's heard of, the right to a jury trial. Simple enough, right? It means a group of regular people, your peers, get to decide what the facts are in your case, not just a single judge. But think about it. That right wouldn't be worth much without the second part. This is the real kicker. A judge can't just toss out what the jury decided. They can't just say, nice try, but I see it differently. The jury's decision on the facts is locked in. You see? One right gives you the power, and the other makes sure that power actually means something.
Now, I'm sure you saw this number in the text and did a double take. $20? Seriously? Today, that wouldn't even cover a couple of movie tickets, let alone a whole legal fight.
But you gotta remember, back in 1791 when this was written, $20 was a huge deal. For a lot of folks, that was more than a month's pay. So while that specific dollar amount is kind of meaningless now, the principle behind it is what's so important. The idea is that there's a line, and once your dispute crosses it, you have the right to demand that your peers, not just a government judge, get to hear the facts.
Okay, but like with any rule, there's always some fine print, right? The Seventh Amendment doesn't just apply to every single legal disagreement out there. There are some really specific limits on where and when you can use this right.
So here's the breakdown. First big one, this is for federal courts only. That's a key detail. Now, most states have their own similar rules, but this specific amendment is a federal thing. Second, it doesn't cover every kind of case. It's mainly for when you're suing for money. It typically doesn't apply in family court, think divorces, or for cases where you're asking a judge to order someone to stop doing something. Like getting an injunction to stop your neighbor from putting a fence on your land. In those kinds of cases, it's usually just a judge making the call.
Okay, so we've got the what and the how. But why does this rule, written over 2 centuries ago, still matter? Why did it endure? What's its real importance in our world today?
This right to a jury in a civil case wasn't just some brand new idea the founders cooked up in 1791. Not at all. It's got deep, deep roots going all the way back to English history. And for the founders who had personally dealt with powerful judges appointed by a king thousands of miles away, this was way more than just a tradition. It was a critical protection. They weren't inventing something new so much as they were preserving a right they felt was absolutely essential for freedom.
And when you boil it all down, that's what this is all about. The Seventh Amendment is a check on power. It puts a firewall of regular citizens, the jury, between you and the power of a government-appointed judge. It's a way of making sure that, when it comes to certain disputes, the final say belongs to the community, not just one person in a robe.
And this all leaves us with a really interesting question for our modern world.
I mean, civil cases today can get incredibly complicated, right? You've got complex financial data, deep scientific testimony. So is a group of 12 random citizens still the best way to figure out the truth in these situations? Or is the principle itself, the idea of a jury of your peers, more vital now than it has ever been? That's really the debate that keeps the Seventh Amendment so relevant today.